Donald Trump didn't just stumble through a tense Oval Office press conference with Japan's prime minister. He detonated the very idea of responsible alliance leadership in front of the cameras. In one jaw-dropping exchange, when asked why the United States didn't coordinate with allies before launching a major attack on Iran, Trump didn't offer strategy, diplomacy, or even a coherent explanation. He reached for grievance and spectacle, tossing out a Pearl Harbor crack as if a World War II surprise attack were just a punchline for a president who can't tolerate accountability. It wasn't merely tasteless. It was revealing. This is what happens when a man who treats foreign policy like a reality show gets cornered by the basic expectations of modern leadership. He lashes out, rewrites history into a prop, and drags America's credibility down with him. The question posed to him wasn't exotic, it wasn't hostile. It was the kind of thing allies ask when they're trying to understand whether the United States still believes alliances are real commitments or just temporary arrangements subject to a single person's moods. In a world where security partnerships hinge on trust, consultation, and predictable decision-making, surprise isn't a magic word that absolves a leader of responsibility to partners who may face blowback. And yet Trump framed the entire issue as if the only metric that matters is whether he got to feel clever for keeping people in the dark. That's the hallmark of a strongman mindset. Treat coordination as weakness, treat transparency as betrayal, treat allies as bystanders who should be grateful for whatever scraps you toss their way. What made it worse, far worse, was the casual way he turned the conversation into an insult aimed at Japan. That Pearl Harbor line wasn't banter. It was Trump using the weight of history as a cudgel to dodge scrutiny in the present. He wasn't educating anyone about World War II. He was exploiting it to escape a simple question: why didn't you inform your allies? This is the same pattern we've seen for years. When confronted with the consequences of his choices, he doesn't answer. He performs. He throws a grenade into the room and then points at the smoke like it proves he's in control. Except the smoke is America's reputation. And the people coughing are the diplomats and service members who have to manage the fallout long after Trump has moved on to the next insult. Then came the broader sabotage, the open contempt for NATO and collective defense, delivered with the kind of petty, transactional tone that makes every allied capital wonder whether Washington is still led by adults. Trump's complaint wasn't that burden sharing is complicated or that defense contributions should be modernized. He reveled in the idea that allies were too late to help, like the purpose of an alliance is to feed a president's ego on a schedule that flatters him. This isn't strategy, it's spite. It's the worldview of someone who sees partnerships not as mutual commitments, but as a stage on which he can demand praise. When he says he doesn't want their help anymore, he's telling the world something chilling. Under MAGA governance, American security commitments are conditional, personal, and revocable, not anchored in institutions, not tied to treaties, and not stable enough for allies to plan around. That instability is the point. Trump's approach thrives on keeping everyone off balance. It allows him to claim he alone can fix the chaos he creates. And it gives him leverage, because if allies are constantly scrambling to interpret his latest outburst, they're not negotiating with the United States as a reliable democratic partner. They're negotiating with a single, volatile individual. That's how democracies get weakened from within. Not always by dramatic coups, but by normalizing the idea that national commitments are whatever one man says they are at the microphone that day. The press conference also underscored a deeper ethical rot. The way Trump casually speaks about war as an excursion while floating enormous numbers like another $200 billion, as if Congress is an ATM that exists to underwrite his impulsive decisions. The sheer moral dissonance is staggering. An excursion is a weekend trip. War is bodies, trauma, shattered families, destabilized regions, and ripple effects that hit fuel prices, global markets, and troop readiness. The rhetorical minimization isn't accidental. It's a political tactic. If you can shrink war down into a euphemism, you can avoid the adult questions. Where is the authorization? What is the objective? What is the exit strategy? What are the costs? Not only in dollars, but in American lives and international stability. Trump's answer, as always, is to gesture at dominance tippy top, as if national security is a leaderboard and the United States exists to win vibes. And let's talk about the alliance angle Trump keeps pretending doesn't matter. Japan is not a random country brought in for photo ops. It's a central pillar of U.S. strategy in the Indo-Pacific. It sits in a region where China's growing military assertiveness, North Korea's missile programs, and contested maritime routes make predictability and trust essential. When a U.S. president humiliates Japan publicly, it doesn't just offend Japanese citizens watching at home, it hands propaganda to adversaries who want to portray the United States as unreliable and crude. It fuels anxiety across Asia about whether American commitments will evaporate with the next tantrum. It also pressures allied leaders who have to answer to their own voters into exploring alternatives, not because they want to abandon America, but because they can't anchor their national security to a partner whose leader thinks diplomacy is a bar fight. Trump also leaned into a particularly corrosive claim that the United States is defending critical shipping lanes for everybody else, and therefore everyone should step up. Here's what that framing does. It turns shared global interests into a protection racket. It suggests America's role in maintaining open commerce, something that benefits the global economy and U.S. Prosperity is just charity we provide out of niceness. That's historically illiterate and strategically dangerous. The U.S. has long supported freedom of navigation, not as altruism, but as a central component of global stability and American economic security. When you sell it as a favor, you invite every country to treat American power as a commodity rather than a cornerstone of an international order. And once you commodify the order, you make it easier to break, because the next time a crisis hits, countries will wonder whether the price will be too high, whether the U.S. will demand humiliation as payment, or whether the president will decide he's bored and walk away. Then there's Trump's habit of declaring victory while the facts remain contested. He talks about having demolished Iran and implies the conflict is practically over, yet he simultaneously pushes a massive new funding ask that signals escalation, not closure. This contradiction isn't a harmless inconsistency. It's what propaganda sounds like when it's being assembled in real time. We're winning. We're crushing them. It's almost done. Paired with, we need hundreds of billions more, is the rhetorical trick of leaders who want the emotional high of triumph without the accountability of outcomes. It keeps supporters in a perpetual state of exhilaration and grievance. Exhilaration because they're told they're dominant, grievance because they're told everyone else is ungrateful and late and weak. And just when you think it can't get more reckless, Trump slips into open politicization of institutions that are supposed to be insulated from presidential vendettas. In the same breathless style, he tosses around insinuations about investigations and corruption targeting figures like the Fed chair, framing complex governance issues as if they're just construction disputes, where he, the master builder, knows best. This is another classic MAGA move. Convert independent institutions into characters in a loyalty drama. If the central bank, the Justice Department, the intelligence community, or the military won't bend to the leader's narrative, then they must be corrupt, disloyal, or fraudulent. The end result is not draining the swamp. It's poisoning the public's trust in democratic governance so that personal rule feels normal. Even more revealing was the way Trump found time to take a swing at Ukraine, because of course he did. In MAGA politics, there is always a scapegoat, always a target to smear in order to redirect attention from the administration's own choices. If munitions are running low, it can't be because war planning is complex, or because Congress has responsibilities, or because supply chains and procurement require competent long-term policy. No, it must be because aid to Ukraine took it down. That line isn't just petty, it's geopolitically destructive. It signals to the world that the United States might blame victims of aggression for America's own readiness challenges, and it encourages adversaries to believe they can outlast U.S. Attention, by exploiting domestic political cynicism, what ties all of this together is a philosophy: government as dominance theater. Trump doesn't speak like a president managing alliances. He speaks like a boss keeping employees afraid. He doesn't talk about shared interests. He talks about who owes him what. He doesn't discuss law, authorization, or oversight. He talks about winning, surprise, and devastation, as if the point of American force is not to defend a stable order, but to indulge his appetite for control and humiliation. And because this worldview is inherently brittle, because it can't survive contact with facts, Trump compensates with constant escalation. Bigger claims, bigger numbers, bigger insults, louder certainty. This is why the press conference matters beyond the cringe. It's not just that Trump said something offensive or bizarre. It's that he showed again how MAGA governance treats diplomacy as disposable and war as branding. The United States spent generations building alliances after World War II precisely because leaders understood that stability requires relationships stronger than any single politician's ego. Those alliances weren't built by perfect people, but they were built by people who recognized that the alternative, pure nationalism, pure transactionalism, pure every country for itself is the recipe that produced catastrophe in the 20th century. When Trump jokes about Pearl Harbor to dodge a question about consultation, he is telling you he doesn't understand that history and he doesn't respect what was built in response to it. And that's the central danger. Trump doesn't just threaten policies. He threatens the idea that America can be trusted to act like a democracy with continuity and restraint. Allies can work with disagreements. They can work with shifting priorities. What they cannot work with is volatility elevated to doctrine. They cannot build defense plans around a president who treats alliance solidarity as a personal favor that can be revoked if he feels disrespected. They cannot put their citizens at risk on the assumption that Washington will show up. When Trump's entire posture suggests that showing up depends on whether the cameras are flattering. So when you watch that moment, the discomfort on the other leader's face, the forced smiles, the stunned pauses, you're watching the cost of MAGA in real time. Not as an abstract debate about ideology, but as a tangible rupture in relationships that keep Americans safer. Trump's supporters may thrill at the theatrics, mistaking insult for strength and unpredictability for genius. But national security is not a barroom game. It is alliances, credibility, law, planning, and restraint. Trump brought none of that to the room. He brought grievance, ego, and the instinct to burn bridges so no one can ever ask him why he didn't build them properly in the first place.